My wife stole $34,000 and divorced me without saying a word for a month. 5 years later, she invited me to her wedding just to humiliate me. She thought I'd stay silent while she lied to the crowd. Instead, I pulled out that old envelope and whispered, "Now's time to show them who you really are." My name is Garrett Hargrove. I've worked construction since I was 22. Framing first, then site management, then foreman on commercial builds. I was good at it. I liked it. I still do. That detail matters, because in Renee's framework, those two facts together, good at it, liked it, were the source of our entire problem. Renee had grown up near money. Not in it, but close enough to absorb its language, its habits, and its specific brand of ambition. By the time we got married, she'd lost the proximity, and she spent the next decade working to get it back. I was not, to put it plainly, the vehicle she had in mind for that journey. I drove a work truck. At her charity fundraisers, I said the wrong things to the right people, shook hands the wrong kind of firm, wore the wrong category of watch. After a while, she stopped bringing me. By year 8, she had stopped mentioning me at club events, entirely told people I was busy with work, which was true, and which was also extremely convenient. Here's what I was paying for during those years. A Riverside Country Club membership, $3,200 annually. Renee held the membership. I paid for it. I was never once invited to use it. Sloan's private high school ran $14,000 a year. Then there was the facade renovation, new front, professional landscaping, a pergola out back that I walked past every single morning on the way to my truck. I paid for that too. My income in those final years was $67,000. I ran those numbers more than once, standing in the driveway, looking at that pergola. I had been the invisible man at those dinner parties long before the official silent treatment started. I just hadn't gotten the memo that it was about to go full-time. The thing that kept me there, through all of it, was Sloan. She was 6 years old the first time I taught her to ride a bike. End of the driveway, late afternoon sun directly in her eyes, and she was squinting like she was daring it. Her hands were white-knuckle tight on the handlebars. When I let go, she didn't notice for 3 full seconds, just pedaled, straight and steady. She called me Daddy G, a name she invented on her own, that nobody taught her. She used it until she was about 12, and then one day she simply didn't anymore. No announcement. No last time that I recognized as the last time. That's the part that got me, later. I didn't know it was ending while it was ending. By 16, she would correct my grammar at the dinner table. Not with any cruelty in it that would have been easier to name. Just as a reflex, the way you fix a word someone mispronounces when you say it right without thinking. She didn't experience it as unkind. That was the inheritance Renee had given her, and it had taken root so completely that Sloan couldn't see it any more than you can see your own accent. The last real conversation we had before everything changed was about whether I was embarrassing her by driving a work truck to her school play. It started on a Sunday morning in October. I came downstairs early and found a bank statement on the counter that hadn't been there the night before. It had been opened and refolded, which told me Renee had already seen it. I picked it up. Second mortgage, both our names, balance $34,000. I had not signed anything. I had not been asked. I read the same line 3 times, then sat down at the table and waited. She came down around 8. I set the statement between us and asked her, quietly, what it was for. She looked at it, then she looked at me. 3 seconds I counted, because something about her expression made me want to be exact about what I was seeing. Then she stood, picked up her coffee, and left the room. No words, no anger. Just gone. Sloan was in the hallway. She looked at me once, then followed her mother. I sat at that table for a long time. Then I got up and went to work. I told myself Renee needed time. By evening, she'd be ready to talk. I got up the next morning, said good morning to her face from 3 feet away, and received nothing, not anger, not dismissal, not even the small acknowledgement that sound had been produced. That was my introduction to what I would later call professional grade ignoring. And what I didn't understand yet was that it had already been rehearsed long before that Sunday morning. I tried everything in the first 2 weeks. I left notes on the kitchen counter. I knocked on the bedroom door. I sat across from Renee at breakfast, made direct eye contact, said good morning, and got nothing, not irritation, not a sigh, not even the small muscle movement that would tell me she'd registered that sound existed. She looked through me the way you look through a window. Sloan did the same, with the same precision, at the same temperature. They ate without setting a place for me at the table. When I sat down in the living room in the evenings, one or both of them would get up and leave within 90 seconds. No comment, No glance on the way out. Just a chair scraping back and the room reassembling itself without me in it. On day 9, I started keeping a log in my phone. Dates, what I tried, exact words, exact response. I wasn't doing it for any legal reason, not yet. I was doing it because by the end of the first week I had started questioning my own memory of things, wondering if I was misreading the room. Writing it down was the only way to stay anchored to what I knew was real. By day 14, the log had 22 entries. I sat in my truck in the parking lot before a job one morning and read all of them back to back. 22 attempts at basic human contact in 2 weeks. Documented. Dated. Every single one met with the exact same response. That was when I stopped wondering if I was misreading anything. The phrase I kept using in my head was professional grade ignoring. It helped to name it. Whatever this was, it had been coordinated. Two people don't independently arrive at the same behavior, the same temperature, the same 90-second exit timing, without having had a conversation I wasn't included in. This had been planned before that Sunday morning. Probably long before. On day 15, I came home to find my shaving kit sitting outside the master bathroom door in a plastic grocery bag. I moved to the spare room that night. Twin bed, floral comforter left over from Sloane's middle school years. I am 6 feet 2. I noted that without dwelling on it and lay down and looked at the ceiling. The house had sounds after midnight. The furnace cycling, pipes contracting in the cold, the third stair creaking when someone went to the kitchen for water. I started calling them house settling in my head, a private joke between me and no one, because the only thing in that building still communicating with me was the plumbing. My coworker Voss asked me one afternoon what was going on at home. I gave him the short version. He said it sounded like a hostage situation. I laughed for the first time in 2 weeks, which felt like more information than I wanted it to be. I started paying close attention to the mail, and to Renee's phone calls, always taken in the backyard, always after I got home, always with the back door pulled shut. They had a focused quality to them. Lowered voice, long pauses, the specific posture of someone relaying information to a person who is writing things down. On day 28, I checked the recent calls on the shared phone plan and found 3 from the same number I didn't recognize. The area code was local. The calls averaged 40 minutes each. Whatever was coming, I understood in that moment, had already been in progress for a while. I just hadn't been told yet. On day 31, I came downstairs at 7 in the morning and found the divorce papers on the kitchen table. They were sitting between the cereal box and a stack of utility bills. There was a yellow sticky note on the signature line. It said, "Sign here." No cover letter, no conversation, no acknowledgement that 12 years was ending on a Tuesday morning between the Cheerios and the gas bill. Renee was at the counter with her back to me, making coffee. She didn't turn around. I picked up the papers and read them. The letterhead was from a family law firm downtown, 2 names, a suite number, the kind of office that doesn't take walk-ins. The property division had already been decided. Renee keeps the house. I get my truck and a $12,000 settlement. And there on page 3, the $34,000 second mortgage I discovered 5 weeks ago appeared under a line that read pre-existing household debt, responsibility of departing spouse. Someone had sat in that suite downtown and thought carefully about every single line of this. Probably for a while. I stood in my own kitchen, holding a document that erased me like a line item on a budget. Professional grade ignoring had evolved into professional grade erasure. I found a pen in the junk drawer. I sat down at that kitchen table for the last time, signed my name on page 4, and kept my copy. Not out of bitterness. I just believe in paper trails. Then I got up and left the house. Renee never turned around. I want to be clear about something, because this matters. I did not walk out on my family. I was handed a document between a cereal box and a gas bill, prepared by an attorney I'd never met, with terms already decided, and given a sticky note that said, "Sign here." Those are not the same thing as walking out. I need you to hold on to that distinction, because in about 5 years, the version of this story that was being told at Riverside Country Club looked nothing like what I just described. Year 1 was survival. A studio near the job site, too many hours, no social life worth naming. I called Sloane twice. She didn't pick up. I left 2 voicemails. After the second one I stopped, because there's a specific kind of quiet that follows a voicemail you know will not be returned, and I had already had enough of that particular quiet to last me. By year 3, I had started my own contracting company, 3 trucks, 6 guys, steady commercial work. By year 5, I was clearing $140,000 a year and owned a condo outright. I kept two things from that house: a photograph of Sloane at 6 years old, squinting into the sun at the end of the driveway on her bike, and my signed copy of the divorce papers, folded in the back of my filing cabinet. Both of them sat exactly where I put them, undisturbed, for 5 years. I had been the invisible man in that house for 30 days, and the invisible father for 5 years after that. I was getting used to it. That was probably the part I should have been more worried about. Then, 8 months ago, I got a voicemail from a man named David, Sloane's fiancé. He didn't just want to introduce himself. He said he'd been hearing a story about me, and that some of the details weren't adding up, and that he'd appreciate the chance to hear my side before he committed to the version he'd been given. We met twice by phone and once in person, at a diner about 10 minutes from one of my job sites. David was younger than I expected, mid-30s, quiet in the way that people are quiet when they've been trained to listen for what isn't being said. He ordered coffee, didn't touch it, and asked me questions the way someone asks questions when they already have partial answers and want to see if you'll fill the gaps honestly or creatively. He told me what he'd been told, that I had been emotionally absent throughout the marriage, career, obsessed, and that I had ultimately chosen to leave when Sloane was in high school. That was the story. He said it plainly, not as an accusation, more like a man reading from a document and watching my face while he did it. Then he stopped and waited. I gave him the outline: the bank statement, the 30 days, the grocery bag outside the bathroom door, the cereal box, the $12,000 settlement, and the $34,000 debt that followed me out the door. I kept my voice level and my sentences short, because the facts didn't need any help from my tone. When I finished, David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She told me you chose to leave." I said, "She left the papers between the Cheerios and the gas bill. Those aren't the same thing." He looked at his coffee. He still hadn't touched it. Then he said, "I'm a civil litigator. I know what a pre-prepared property settlement means. I know who writes those and when, and I know which party they're written for." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. A pre-prepared settlement means one party had legal counsel before the other party knew the conversation was happening. David had understood that the moment I described it. He'd been doing math in his head since before I sat down. I made a joke somewhere in there about my post-divorce years, told him I'd spent the first 12 months running a one-man investigation with a burner phone and a bank statement. Budget James Bond, I said, no useful intelligence gathered, terrible expense report. David didn't laugh. That told me more about how seriously he was taking this than anything he said out loud. By the end of that coffee, I understood the full shape of what had been built without me. The story had been consistent across 5 years, and an entire social circle: country club friends, family, Sloane's friend group. Emotionally absent husband, career over family, walked out when his daughter needed him. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? Renee is charming, socially fluent, and had been the only visible parent for 5 years. The story fit the evidence available to people who only ever had her side of it. My sister had heard it secondhand at a mutual friend's birthday 3 years ago. She called me, furious. I told her to let it go. That was one of 2 decisions I regret from those 5 years. The other is not calling Sloane a third time. What I didn't know until David told me was that the wedding invitation had been Sloane's idea. The cream envelope, the address in careful handwriting, Sloane had written it herself, not Renee. David mentioned it like a footnote. I carried it like something heavier than that. 2 weeks after that coffee, the envelope arrived. I held it for a while at my kitchen counter. Then I went to my filing cabinet, found the folded papers in the back, and took them out. 5 years in a drawer had made the crease lines soft and permanent, the kind of fold that stays because paper has a memory. I pressed them flat with my palm, smoothing each line deliberately, the way you'd flatten something you'd been carrying too long. Then I slid them into the inside pocket of the charcoal blazer I'd bought for the occasion, buttoned the jacket, and stood there in my kitchen looking at nothing in particular. I wasn't planning anything. That's what I told myself. The last thing David had said before we ended that final call was a question. "Do you still have the papers?" I said yes. There was a pause. Then he said, "Bring them." 2 words. Same count as the sticky note. Completely different instructions. I want to be honest about my intentions going into that day, because I think I owe you that much. I was not going to cause a scene. I had not spent 5 years rebuilding my life to walk into my daughter's wedding and detonate it for the sake of personal satisfaction. I was going to go as a guest, eat the food, shake David's hand, and leave quietly. That was the plan. I had thought it through. The papers were in my jacket pocket as a personal reminder, a talisman, something to hold on to in case the evening got difficult. That's what I told myself while I was getting dressed. I told myself that with some conviction, actually. I'm not entirely sure I believed it, but the conviction was real enough to get me out the door. I bought a new blazer for the occasion, charcoal gray, off the rack, from a department store near the job site. When I put it on, my coworker Voss looked me over for a long moment and said, "You look like a budget James Bond going to his own funeral." I did not disagree with either part of that. I took the folded papers from my filing cabinet, pressed them flat one last time with my palm, and slid them into the inside pocket. The crease lines from 5 years of folding were permanent, the kind that stay because paper remembers. If I ever produced them, they would look like exactly what they were. Something a man had been carrying for a very long time. I drove to Riverside Country Club and sat in the parking lot for a moment. Valets in white gloves were moving Autos and BMWs in a neat row. My 2019 F-150 had the company logo on the door. I let that be what it was. Then I got out. My seating card said Mr. Hargrove, guest of groom, not father of the bride. I had expected that. I set it back down, found my table near the back third of the room, close to the kitchen door, and reached for the bread. I had gotten very good at waiting over the past 5 years. Renee found me before the first course arrived. She sat down without being invited, which looked like warmth from across the room and felt like something else entirely up close. Champagne-colored dress, professional hair, rings I still didn't recognize. Her smile was for the surrounding tables, not for me. Her eyes moved to the main room twice in the first few seconds, tracking, always tracking, making sure the performance was landing correctly for the right audience. Then she slid something across the tablecloth. A note card. Riverside Country Club stationery embossed logo at the top, her handwriting below. 4 numbered points. Keep it brief. Mention Sloane's accomplishments. Reference being away a lot for work. No mention of the past 5 years. She had used the venue's own paper to hand me a script. That was the kind of detail that would be funny if it weren't so exact. I read it twice. Folded it. Put it in my shirt pocket. Looked at her. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. She patted the table once and stood up, satisfied, already moving back toward her room. I watched her go. Then I reached into my jacket and pressed 2 fingers against the folded papers through the fabric, just to confirm they were still there. They were. The toast started after the first course was cleared. The best man went first. College stories, inside jokes, the kind of speech that gets laughs from half the room and polite smiles from the other half. Then Renee stood up. Her speech was polished and warm, the way everything Renee does in public is polished and warm. She talked about Sloane's strength, her grace, her ability to make every room better simply by being in it. She mentioned me once, near the end, folded into a single subordinate clause. Sloane's father, who couldn't always be present but loved her in his way. She said it gently, with a small sad smile that invited sympathy without appearing to ask for it. Half the room probably felt sorry for her right then. I watched a woman at table 4 bring her champagne glass slowly to her lips and nod. That was the abandoned father narrative, served warm, with a garnish. Then David stood. He thanked the best man, said a few words about Sloane that were brief and genuine and clearly unrehearsed. Then he looked up from his notes, looked past the front tables, past the middle of the room, all the way to the back third, and found me by the kitchen door. "I'd also like to invite Sloane's father to say a few words," he said. He did not look at Renee when he said it. The room did, though. Her smile held, but something underneath it shifted, a load-bearing wall quietly giving way. She did not stand. She did not object. There was nothing she could do in that room, in front of those people, that wouldn't look exactly like what it was. I picked up the wireless microphone and walked from the back of the hall to the front. 200 people. White tablecloths. The string ensemble gone quiet without being asked. It took long enough that the room got very still. I adjusted the microphone. I looked at David once. He gave me nothing, just waited, which was exactly right. "Good evening," I said. "I'm Garrett Hargrove. Most of you probably don't know who I am. I'd like to fix that." I started where the note card told me to start. Sloane's work ethic, her stubbornness, which she came by honestly and which I had always considered one of her better qualities. Then I told them about the bike. End of the driveway, late afternoon, the sun directly in her eyes. The way she didn't notice I'd let go for 3 full seconds, just pedaled, straight and steady. The name she invented for me that nobody taught her. I heard someone near the front make a small sound. I kept my voice even and my pace slow, because this part was true and it deserved its room. Renee's shoulders dropped a fraction. The note card was working. She thought I was going to stay on script. David, I said, I want to be the kind of father-in-law who's honest with you from the start. So I need to correct something that was said a few minutes ago. The room went a different kind of still. I wasn't absent because I couldn't be present. I was absent because I was handed a document and asked to be. I kept my voice flat and my sentences short, because the facts didn't need help from my tone. I told them about the month of silence through 3 details. A good morning spoken directly into a face that gave nothing back. A shaving kit in a plastic grocery bag, outside a bathroom door, plates set for 2 people at a table of 3. I did not editorialize. I described. By the end of the first 2 weeks, I had 22 entries in a phone log, every attempt documented. Everyone met with the same response. I called it what I had always called it in my head. Professional grade ignoring. 30 days of it, precisely executed, by 2 people who had clearly rehearsed. And then a Tuesday morning. A cereal box, a sticky note that said sign here. Which brings me to something I've been carrying for a while, I said. I reached into my jacket. The papers came out folded, the crease lines soft from 5 years in a drawer. I didn't raise them over my head. I held them at chest height, visible to the front tables, and let the room take a moment with them. These are the divorce papers Renee left on the kitchen table 5 years ago, I said. Prepared by her attorney. Property division already decided before I knew the conversation was happening. My signature is on page 4. Her attorney's letterhead is on page 1. And the $34,000 second mortgage taken out in both our names without my knowledge appears on page 3 as pre-existing household debt, my responsibility, on my way out the door. I set the papers on the table in front of me. I did not point at Renee. I did not raise my voice. At the head table, David leaned forward slightly. He is a civil litigator. He had understood what a pre-prepared property settlement meant the moment I described it to him in that diner, and he understood what it meant now, in this room. With the document sitting on a white tablecloth at Riverside Country Club, something in his posture settled the confirmation of a calculation he had already run. I didn't walk out on my daughter. I was handed the door, handed the handle, and handed a settlement that gave me my truck and $12,000. The house, including the mortgage I didn't know existed, stayed behind. Then Renee stood up. This is not the time or the place. I looked at her. I kept my voice at exactly the same register it had been in for the last 4 minutes. You chose the venue, Renee, I said. I just showed up. I set the microphone on the table. The room was very quiet. At table 4, the woman with the champagne glass had put it down and was not picking it back up. 2 of Renee's country club friends were looking at each other with the specific expression of people recalibrating a story they'd believed for years. The wedding photographer had stopped moving. Camera still up, whether by instinct or accident, she had not lowered it. Renee said something else. I didn't track the exact words because my attention was on the head table. Sloan was crying, but the tears were ambiguous, and I did not try to resolve the ambiguity, because I genuinely didn't know what they meant, and I wasn't going to pretend I did. I looked at David once more. He gave me a single nod, not a smile, not a word, just a nod, the kind that passes between 2 people who had 3 phone calls and 1 diner coffee and arrived at the same conclusion by different routes. It was enough. I walked back to my table and sat down. My first course had been cleared while I was at the microphone. A server had replaced it with the entree salmon, which I hadn't selected but wasn't going to argue with. Behind me, I could hear Renee's voice, elevated, moving through the room, explaining, redirecting, running damage control, on a narrative that had just been publicly audited in front of 200 people and 1 civil litigator. I did not turn around. I picked up my fork. The food was excellent. I drank water instead of champagne because I was driving the F-150 home, and the company logo on the door was not something I wanted associated with a poor decision. The string ensemble had resumed something soft and unhurried that I couldn't name and didn't try to. The room had not returned to normal, but it was continuing. Rooms do that. I had been the invisible man in that house for 30 days, and the invisible father for 5 years after that. I ate my salmon and let Renee manage her own mess. I was almost to the coat check when I heard my name. Not Dad. Not Mr. Hargrove. Garrett, spoken in a voice I hadn't heard directed at me in 5 years, which I recognized immediately and completely. I turned around. Sloan was there. Eyes still wet, not saying anything yet. I looked at her, really looked, and saw something in her face that didn't have a clean name. Not resolution. Something earlier than that. A door opened just enough to let some air through. "I'll call you next week," I said. I meant it. She nodded once and let me go. I retrieved my blazer, tipped the coat check attendant $5, and walked out. My F-150 was where I'd left it, company logo on the door, exactly as out of place as when I'd pulled in. I brought it around myself and drove out onto the main road. The divorce papers were still in the inside pocket of the blazer on the seat beside me. Same fold, same crease lines. Lighter than they'd been in years. I turned the radio on. The house had stopped settling a long time ago.